All right, so today's episode for What on Earth is Happening is episode number 206, and it is entitled What Natural Law Is Not. Thank you to Brett Hatton for the awesome artwork that he's been churning out every week. Looks great. So this is the title slide for this week's presentation. And I think it hints at what we're really going to be talking about, because this is the big stumbling block for most people when it comes to the understanding of natural law. They always want to try to claim that you are applying morality, okay, that is gauged in human standards to the animal kingdom, and or vice versa, that you are trying to apply animal behavior to human beings. And nothing could be further from the truth, okay? People want to confuse the term natural, the word natural, meaning having to do with the natural world, okay, with the term natural law, which has to do with the consequences for behaviors that human beings take regarding whether they are moral behaviors or not, and the set of consequences that are actually delivered by the universe as a direct result of the free will behavioral choices that human beings make. One has absolutely nothing to do with the other, the way that animals behave versus the way that human beings, through their free will, choose to behave. And we have to understand that natural law does not apply to beings that are of lesser developmental complexity than human beings. Okay? So that's the main thing that I'm going to be going through in this presentation today, and trying to forcefully hammer home, because I'm telling you, there are people out there that still don't get it. I still get emails from people asking me, well, if animals can do this to other animals, why are human beings judged according to different standards? And the answer is, we're not just other animals, okay? We have to understand that we are held to different account because of the complexity of the human brain structure and the human nervous system and the complexity of the human soul, and free will compared to what the animal kingdom has available unto it. Okay? We are not the same as the rest of the animal kingdom. This is actually the idea that we are just another animal and no different than the animals that behave with purely instinctual behavior is a satanic concept. This is one of the things that we'll be talking about when I get into Darwinism regarding this, because that's another thing people confuse natural law with. When they hear the word natural, this is what's been completely co-opted as the term, okay? People think that natural is immediately associated and correlated with Darwinism, okay? And we're going to be talking about how that's not true. So let's jump into the slides, okay? So the first thing people have to understand here is that when we're talking about the term natural law, you have to completely set aside what you think you know, okay? What you think you know by hearing that phrase, because this is what people do. And I've noticed it. I observe human behavior. I'm a keen observer of human behavior. I don't always tell people exactly what I think about what I'm seeing, okay? I observe it and I generally stay quiet about it, but then I bring the findings forward from my observations here on the show to try to help people to understand what's really going on in the human mind, in the human psyche, as in the aggregate, okay? In the far-reaching numbers of human beings on this planet. The first thing we have to understand is that most people, when they hear a phrase or a term that they don't fully understand, or that they don't really know what you're saying when you say the term or phrase, they don't want to appear stupid. Okay, they want to think that they understand what you're saying, because one of the worst things that anybody can really undergo is another human being going to them, do you understand what I am saying? It's probably one of the most insulting and degrading things that really you can say to another human being. Can your brain and the processes going on in your brain follow the words that I am saying and extrapolate correct meaning from what I am saying? Okay? So we're talking about internalized definitions in the human mind. Okay? And this is where the disconnect happens when it comes to natural law. Because when you say that phrase, what people immediately go to is the internalized definitions that they have for the words natural and the word law. The words natural and law. Okay? And when they bring forward those definitions, that of what has been repeatedly hammered into their brain since the moment of their birth, since the minute they dropped out of the womb, okay, are these socially accepted, colloquialized definitions, okay, everyday speaking term definitions of what the word natural and what the word law means. And I'm telling you right now, they immediately associate the word natural with Darwinism in their mind because of the other phrase that we'll be talking about called natural order, which has nothing to do with order whatsoever. Okay, so this phrase really sums up the battle that we're immediately up against when anybody tries to teach natural law or to convey a correct understanding of natural law to other people. And I know there are many people with this frustration. It's not just me. There are people who try to explain to people what natural law means, and it's like they fall straight on their face because they don't address the person's misunderstanding in their own internalized mental definition that they are ascribing to the term natural law, instead of starting from a blank slate and saying, I don't know what that term as you are using it means. Okay? They don't want to admit that. So the first thing here is this quote by Epictetus. It says, "It is impossible to begin to learn that which one thinks one already knows." If you think you already understand what somebody is actually talking about and trying to teach and trying to convey, and that you don't need to actually listen and hear what they are saying in fullness, then you can't really be taught. It is impossible for you to really learn. Okay? This is that whole idea of teachability. So teachability derives from a balance between healthy skepticism and an open-mindedness, willingness to learn and grow. That's where the optimum teachability comes from, learnability, whatever you want to call it. The ability to be taught by someone else, the ability to learn through being helped or taught by someone else, okay? So we have to understand this is where most people are approaching natural law from. They hear the phrase and they think they know what it means, okay? They think they already know it. And this is what has to be, I would say, in people trying to convey this to other people, directly confront that. Directly confront it with people and say it directly to them. You have an incorrect internalized definition grinding away in your mind, and you think you know what I mean by the term natural law, and you do not. And it's confrontative. It's almost belligerent because you're directly saying to someone else, you think you know, and you do not know what I am talking about or what I mean. You're extrapolating what you think I'm saying instead of actually listening to what I am actually saying. And this goes back to the idea that 99.9% of human beings on this planet hear what they want to hear. They don't hear what's actually being said. They only hear that which they prefer to hear. Okay? So we're starting with the most direct confrontative thing that you could possibly say to another human being. You're not really listening to what's being said. You're operating according to prejudiced, prejudged internal definitions. Okay? And what I am saying is not directly correlating with the meaning that's being interpolated and extracted in your own mind. To really do that, you have to be truly in the present moment. You have to stop thinking about all the other things you're going to respond with or what you think it means. And you have to be present fully. Okay? And then two, you have to silence the mind. See, even if one isn't actually speaking, to really learn and take something in, you have to silence the internal dialogue of the mind because that's chattering away often louder than words. Okay? And it blocks an internal reception of understanding and meaning. Okay? These are spiritual concepts that help with learning and growth and development. The ability to actually listen, to stop the internal chatter and listen to what's really being said. Okay? We all get distracted. We all have things we're thinking about. But again, to directly confront this dynamic up front is, I think, one of the most effective ways of doing this, and saying, be present in the moment. Empty the mind of all other clutter and internal dialogue and actually listen to what's being said. Okay? And then you're in the maximum position to learn. So, if we step into that present moment awareness, if we step into that true spiritual center, that's where real learning and growth take place. Okay? That's where we're in an optimum position to learn. All right? And I'm telling you, folks, one of the things that is going to absolutely open the gateway of the mind and the soul more than anything else is truly understanding natural law. This is the key to everything. Okay? It's the most important foundational aspect of all of my work, of all real spiritual teachers anywhere, at any time that have ever lived, as far as I'm concerned. These are the keys to the kingdom, ladies and gentlemen. Okay? So first of all, I want to say this will not be a total review of natural law or my natural law seminar. So this is the title slide of my natural law seminar. It was called Natural Law, the Real Law of Attraction, and How to Apply It in Your Life. Okay? So I very highly recommend that anyone who has not gone through this lecture in its entirety, it's a 9.5 hour long seminar, okay, to go to my website and or YouTube channel and listen to it in its entirety, all 3 parts. I want you to, let's temporarily back off the slides because I'm going to bring up in my web browser where you can get this this seminar. Okay, so we're in the web browser now, and I'm going to just show you. All you have to do is click on videos on whatonearthishappening.com. So go to whatonearthishappening.com, click on the videos tab. All right. So when you get to the videos tab, I always keep the natural law seminar videos at the top. Okay. So there's 3 of them. Okay. And the page is loading. All right. There we go. It's loaded. So this is natural law, the real law of attraction, and how to apply it in your life, part 1 of 3. If you look underneath this, if you scroll down, this is part 2 of 3. Okay. And then if you scroll down to the 3rd video on the page, this is part 3 of 3. They're approximately a little around the 3-hour mark each, give or take a little bit. Okay. But that's the entirety of the all-day seminar that I gave back in New Haven, Connecticut on October 19th, 2013. Okay. So if you haven't seen this, that is the best place to go for an understanding of what natural law is. So we could back off the slides one more time, and I'll go back to my presentation slides. Okay. So just moving this slide forward one more time. This is the Stargate, folks. This is the spiritual Stargate of inner transformational understanding that needs to take place in the human mind. I don't know how I could word it any more accurately. Okay. And people will say, oh, you're, making it sound so grandiose and self-important. No, it has nothing to do with me. Okay. Natural law is either understood, is discovered and understood, or it is not. It is a force that exists in the universe, in nature, inherently, as we're going to talk about. This seminar explains how it operates and how we can bring our behavior into alignment with it if we want to change the world for the better. And that's a big if, okay? If we're being honest with ourselves, if we want to do what we say we want to do, okay? So please, if you have not already watched it, everybody who's really a fan of this show should have already seen this. But if you haven't, you need to watch this in particular aspect of my work in its entirety, from beginning to end, all 3 parts. Okay? So let's look at what natural law is before we look at what it is not. Okay? So we're going to do the opposite. This is the cataphatic variant of what natural law is, meaning we're defining it in the affirmative before we look at the apophatic, which are aspects of what natural law is not, which I'm going to go through in order. Okay. Natural law is a set of universal, inherent, objective, non-man-made, eternal, and immutable conditions which govern the consequences of behaviors of beings with the capacity for understanding the difference between harmful and non-harmful behavior. That is a mouthful as a working definition. I've said it before. This is probably the simplest that natural law can be defined. However, it is still a complex definition that almost reads like a run-on sentence. But if we take each part in order of the words that I'm using to define what natural law is, the meaning becomes very unambiguously clear. Okay? It is a set of universal conditions, meaning there's not like one thing that you could define as natural law. It's a set of dynamics. I would define it as the governing dynamics in all of nature when it comes to human behavior or the behavior of advanced beings in the universe. Okay, whether you want to consider human beings, quote, advanced, I'm talking about beings with the ability to think at our level or beyond our level. Okay, that's all. So it's a set of universal conditions. What does universal mean? It means exactly what it says, that it exists and operates everywhere in the entire universe. There is nowhere in our universe that you can go to escape the conditions known as natural law. They exist everywhere at all times and places in our universe. Okay? They are inherent. Inherent means that they are existing within nature. They are not created as a constructural idea. These laws exist inherently in the universe. Okay? That's what the word inherent means. It means it's not artificially constructed. They are a natural dynamic within nature itself. Okay? They are objective, meaning that they exist independently of human perception or any perception for that matter. Okay? They exist in the three-dimensional world, in the 3D space-time continuum, in the natural universe. Okay? They are laws which operate whether we understand them, believe in them, want them to exist, okay? Or have any type of subjective idea about them. That's all irrelevant. They operate the way that they operate, completely independent of human perception. They are non-man-made. Human beings did not make these things. They are not constructural ideas that exist in the human mind or psyche, okay? Like man-made laws are, okay? They're not psychological constructs, okay? They're not agreed upon ideas, all right? This is the bulk of my work. The underlying essence of all of my work with What on Earth is Happening is to distinguish between the genuine and the artificial, the real, the natural, the genuine, versus the artificial, the illusory, the constructural. That dichotomy, that understanding, the ability to discern between those two things is one of the underlying foundational aspects of my work with What on Earth is Happening. So these are not man-made constructs. Okay, they exist inherently in the universe. They are eternal, meaning that they will exist and always have existed, always will exist. You will never take these laws out of the fabric of creation. That it cannot be done. For as long as the universe exists, these laws will exist because they are part of the universe. They are actually embedded into the fabric of creation itself as a part of nature. They are immutable conditions. That means that they can never be changed. Since they're eternal, they can never be changed. There is no thing, there is no event, there is no task, there is no action that anyone can do to change how natural law operates. Okay? You are not going to do anything to change how the force of gravitation is at work on any given planet. It is that way. It is a law of nature. You are incapable of doing anything to take that law out of nature. Okay? Even if you destroyed the planet, gravitation would still exist. Okay? The force would still exist inherently in nature. The same thing here. It's immutable. You cannot do anything to change it. And what does it do? What does this set of universal laws that have all these properties do? They govern the consequences. So they govern consequences, meaning once a behavior is chosen through free will and then acted upon, you receive a set of circumstances based upon the wisdom that is inherent or lack thereof in the free will choice that was made regarding the behavior. And that's done not just individually, but in the aggregate, meaning it's done collectively over all of an entire species. Okay? And then we reap what we sowed out into the universe. So this is a mirroring factor. The natural law is a mirroring dynamic. What we put out into the universe through our free will behavior, okay, is then reflected back toward us by being given the consequences of that free will behavior. There is free will to act in a certain capacity, but there is not any freedom to escape the consequences of the free will behavioral choices that we choose to enact. That cannot be done. So this is the idea that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Okay, you could boil all of this down, all the way down to the physical domain. See, natural laws come to us through physical laws, through the physical world. Okay? But they are spiritual laws because they are operating in the realm of the causal realm. Then they become manifested on the manifested plane, the plane of manifestation, or the physical world. Okay? So, and they govern the consequences of behaviors of beings with the capacity for understanding the difference between harmful and non-harmful behavior. So I did not say in this definition that natural law applies to all beings. Did I? Never did. Okay? It doesn't apply to all beings. It applies to beings at our level, at the human level of spiritual understanding and development that we have reached and beyond. Not backwards or lesser in spiritual, mental, psychological development, which means any animal that is outside of the human domain. Okay? So this is the first thing to understand about what natural law is. Natural law applies to human beings and more advanced beings that have the capacity to think at our level or beyond. It does not apply to beings that don't have the capacity to think at a human level to understand the difference between right and wrong behavior objectively. So, can you have a discussion about morality with a cat? No, you cannot. The cat cannot cognize. Its cognitive functionality does not operate at that level. Can you sit with a field mouse and have a discussion about which behaviors that a human being can take that are right because they don't cause harm versus behaviors that they can take that do cause harm to other sentient beings and are therefore wrongs? Can you sit and have a conversation about that topic with a field mouse? Okay? If you say that you can, you're a little slow in the mental capacity. Maybe natural law might not apply to you because you might not be as smart as the field mouse. Okay? That's the problem with most people. Okay? Is that they're really operating from a place of mental retardation. And I'm not talking about any condition. Again, when I say that, people are like, oh, don't insult people with these conditions. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about being slow, being slowed down. That's what the word to retard means. The verb retard, look it up in any good dictionary, and it means to slow the progress of. And that's where humanity is largely at. They're in a process of retardation, of having had their mental faculties slowed way down to the point where they have a hard time grasping the true meaning of anything and how it works. And that's why the globalists, that's why the Satanists, the dark Luciferians, the dark occultists, whatever you want to refer to them as, the mind controllers, the social engineers, okay, the powers that shouldn't be operating in our world and conducting and holding people in the state of slavery that they are. Okay, that's why they're winning. They're winning. Hardcore, they're winning. Okay? They're not on the ropes. They're not on the run. Okay? These people have humanity exactly where they want it. Exactly where they want it. So, It doesn't apply to all beings. It applies to beings with the capacity for the understanding of objective morality. And that's not the animal kingdom, folks. That's human, family, and beyond. Okay? The understanding of natural law, which is what we need to arrive at, that's the discovery and the internal understanding of it, is centered upon bringing our own conscience, which is a form of knowledge, as we're going to talk about, into alignment with objective morality. Morality is objective. It is not subjective. It is not a constructural idea or thought brought about by man and agreed upon. It exists in nature, in the natural world, because the behavior that we conduct exists in the natural domain. Therefore, the characteristics of that behavior, being either harmful or non-harmful to other sentient beings, also exists in the natural domain. This just follows logically, and anybody that cannot follow that logical progression of thought doesn't have a logically ordered mind. And that's the problem. That's one of the big parts of the problem, folks. Okay? They can't get down to first principles because they don't have a mind that operates according to philosophical first principles. It's a catch-22. They can't reason at that level in many cases. That's why there's so many moral subjectivists or moral relativists out there. They're slow on the uptake. They can't reason at a philosophical level and reason from first principles. So, understanding natural law ultimately means definitively knowing, not believing, not accepting, not grasping at straws, not just conjecturing, okay? It means definitively knowing. Read the actual words I've written. Definitively knowing, meaning absolutely, definitely, without any shadow of a doubt in one's mind. Definitively knowing which behaviors are rights because they do not cause harm to other sentient beings, and which behaviors are wrongs because they do cause harm to other sentient beings. They initiate harm to other sentient beings. That's what a wrongdoing is. And rights are right behaviors because they do not initiate harm to other sentient beings. This is the definitive correct definition of what a right and a wrong is. And most people in humanity cannot give you anywhere close to a semblance of that definition, sadly. That's why we're losing our rights, because people don't even know what they are. So, this is what natural law is. I, of course, picked the Justice card from the tarot deck to represent natural law because it is the natural law card of the tarot deck. It is the universal force of justice that operates in the universe that can never be escaped and is the enthroned king of creation. Okay? It is the enthroned ultra sovereign of creation. It is the only thing that all the other sovereign beings of creation are ultimately subjected to, are bound by these laws. That's it. And when we understand them, we can bring our behavior into alignment with them and become masters of free will. Okay? Not just having the capacity to exercise it, but mastering it. And when we do that, there's no ceiling on what our capacities are as individuals or as a species. But the problem is we don't understand these laws. We're operating our behavior according to total ignorance regarding these laws, and therefore we're unconsciously creating in our lives as human beings altogether in the aggregate. We're unconsciously, aggregately co-creating our reality. Okay? Until we understand these laws and we bring our behavior into alignment with them, we will never be consciously in the aggregate co-creating the human reality together. We're just going to be chaotically, wandering about, not understanding how we got the result in the universe that we got, how we got the result in our world that we got, that we received as a result of how we collectively behaved. So, that's what natural law actually is. Here's how it works in the world. When human beings in the aggregate live in harmony with natural law and are therefore moral, they become and remain free. When human beings in the aggregate live in opposition to natural law and are therefore immoral, they become and remain enslaved. I refer to this dynamic of natural law as the law of freedom. And I would state the law of freedom as this: as aggregate morality increases, aggregate freedom increases. And as aggregate morality declines, aggregate freedom declines. Or in other words, if you want to write it out as a simple mathematical equation, the sum of freedom, or in other words, aggregate freedom, is directly proportional to, that's what that infinity sign with the last quarter of it cut off means. It means it is directly proportional to, means if you increase one, you increase the other. If you decrease one, you decrease the other in direct proportion. Okay? So aggregate freedom, or the sum of the freedom of all the beings that comprise any given society, is directly proportional to the sum of the morality of all the beings that comprise any given society. Aggregate freedom is directly proportional to aggregate morality. That's a mathematical definition in the universe of how the laws of nature ultimately behave when it comes to human behavior. This is how freedom is created or destroyed. Okay? And this is part of the problem, folks, is that the whole so-called freedom community, which we don't even have, we have the my freedom community that just wants freedom for various selfish reasons in their own mind, do not want to understand first principles and objective reality when it comes to the laws of the universe. They don't want to get that. They want to believe it's just all random and that they can still have all their subjective opinions when it comes to morality and still somehow be free. You know what people who think like that are? They're clowned out asshats. Okay? To put it in street lingo. If you are a moral subjectivist or a moral relativist and you think you can somehow ever create a state of freedom with that mindset, what happened to you is that the social engineers, the satanic social engineers of our society, clowned you the fuck out, boy. That's what happened. That's what happened. Get as offended as you like. But that's eternally true and can never be made untrue. That's what happened to you, boy. Okay? Get over it. Get as offended as you like and get the fuck over it. Natural law is all about conscience, folks. Conscience. Now, people think conscience is action. Conscience is not action. The exercise of conscience is action. Conscience is knowledge. The word science is right in the word conscience. So conscience comes from two Latin words. The first is the Latin prefix con. When you put that in the front of a Latin word, it means together. Okay? And the Latin verb sciere, which is the infinitive of the verb scio. Scio would be the first person. So scio means I know in Latin. Sciere means to know. Okay? It's where the word science comes from. Science is knowledge. Real science is knowledge. So when we put these two together, conscience literally means to know together. To come to a state of knowledge together. It is the knowledge. Conscience is the knowledge of the objective difference between right action and wrong action. It is not the free will exercise of the behavior. That's exercising conscience. The exercise of conscience is the behavior. The conscience is the knowledge. So when we take a behavior and we do it in conscience, that means we know what the difference between right and wrong are, and through our free will, we're exercising that choice. We are actually exercising to behave within our rights or outside of our rights. Conscience is common sense knowledge, or at least it should be. See, that herein lies the problem again. Okay? I'm giving you the answer, but in the answer, you can see where the problem is. Conscience should be common sense in humanity, but unfortunately it's not. The knowledge of the objective difference between right and wrong action is not common sense knowledge in the body of humanity. And that's the problem. That's why humanity is enslaved. For that very underlying causal factor reason that people believe morality is subjective and a constructural idea that exists only in the human mind and not inherently and objectively in nature. That's the reason human beings are enslaved. That's the very underlying causal factor reason. But you can't tell that to hard-headed fucks in the freedom movement. You can't do it. See, I'm not interested in debating anybody on it. I'm telling you this is the way it eternally is, whether you understand it or not, or whether you ever fucking understand it or not. It won't matter. It doesn't matter. This is testimony. That's all this is. All I'm doing, I'm testifying to what the eternal laws of creation actually are. Not because I say they're that way, but because I, among many countless others, who is insignificant in the entire cosmic play of things, okay, it was one of the infinite amount of people who has discovered it or whoever will discover it. Because this is a law that exists in nature that is discoverable. Has nothing to do with me whatsoever. That's like saying, because you understand gravity, that's like, oh, you're saying that because gravity exists because you say it does. Yeah. This is the logical fallacy people use. Okay? No, gravity doesn't exist because I say it does. It exists because it's an inherent law in nature. That's it, period. And we understand it through its observable effects, the same way we understand natural law through its observable effects. But once again, what it all comes down to, folks, and it always has come down to nothing else but this. Human beings want to be God. That's all it comes down to. Human beings want to be God. That's all it comes down to. No other dynamic. And they want to be the lawmaker. And they want to say there's no law that operates outside of my law. That's it. And I'm not bound by anything. That's what human beings want ultimately. That's called the ego completely run amok, taking over the soul of the individual, setting up shop in the brain and saying, I run you, motherfucker. That's how out of control the ego is in the human mind that thinks like that. That's exactly what it is. And this is the vast majority of the freedom movement. So-called freedom movement. Freedom, my ass. Freedom movement. It's a bunch of people, it's a bunch of little clown baby boys and girls fighting amongst each other, just like the social engineers want them to when they pull on their puppet strings. Pulling on their puppet strings, making them dance like marionettes. That's all. That's what the freedom movement is. It's a joke. A joke. I'm calling people out in it. Okay? You know? I can see how unpopular I am, and I don't give a fuck. I'm not interested in popularity. I'm not here to win popularity contests. I'm here to explain how the laws of morality actually work so that ignorant human beings can attempt to align their behavior to them and stop being fucking enslaved. That's what I'm here to attempt to do. Yeah, I know how futile it is because I know how burnt the brains of most human beings are. Believe me, I know. I'm not naive in that capacity. I know how burnt people's minds are. I talked about on a couple of former shows the etymological root of the word natural. I'll briefly go over this. The English word nature is etymologically derived from the ancient Cometian/Egyptian word netter. Okay? So this is what natural law is all about, folks. This is the underlying etymological definition of the word nature. And the word nature has been co-opted. It's been co-opted to mean, something that has to do with Darwinian survival of the fittest, which we'll talk about. Okay? And this has nothing to do with the word nature from its etymological roots. The word nature in Cometian meant God. It was the word for God. And some people will translate it as spirit, but it means great spirit, the grand spirit that underlies everything, the intelligent creation that underlies all things, all matter, and all laws of nature. So for lack of a better word, we're going to use the word God here. Okay? Get as offended about it as you like. Netter was symbolized, again, there's no real vowels in Egyptian, okay? It's a phonetic pronunciation, neter, okay? This is how most people pronounce it, but as we'll see, that's not how it was really pronounced. NTR, let's say, was symbolized hieroglyphically as a simple stylized flag on a pole, stylized in other cultures as a cleaving axe. We get the judge's gavel, you know? We get Thor's hammer from this symbol, okay? We get the axes of early hero cults, solar cults, stellar cults, etc., okay? We get Thor's hammer from it. We get the judge's gavel that comes down in the modern court system from this, okay? It's the idea of where real power lies, okay? Because that's what the court system wants to be. It wants to be God, okay? So it's taking that and using it as a proxy symbol, okay? So what NTR, or the flag on a stylized flag on a pole, represented was a force which was known to exist in nature through its observable effects, like the force of wind operating in the world, but difficult or impossible to see with the eye. It's not something that is a physical, a distinct physical thing, okay? You largely know about it through its effects in the world, okay? You're not going to actually see it like fire or smoke, okay? So that's why they depicted it as a flag, because you don't see the air and it holds the flag aloft, okay? NTR was actually pronounced netcher, not netter, as many people will pronounce it. The actual pronunciation in ancient Cometian was netcher, okay? Extremely close to the English pronunciation of nature. And that's where we get the word natural from the Egyptian netcher, okay? Natural, so when we tack on the suffix al, which comes from Sanskrit and then later, Indus Valley root words that then came into Old English as al, it means of, from, or related to, the suffix al, okay? And when we add that with the word nature, it means of, from, or relating to God, okay? Now, if you want to even look at it from the Arabic and or Hebrew word el, okay, that al could also be derived from, what does the word el mean in those languages? In Arabic, it's the definitive article, but in Hebrew, it means God. Literally, the word el means God in Hebrew. So the word natural is completely related to the idea of God, meaning that man didn't make it, God did, or ultimately the creative energy and intelligence that underlies all matter made it. So what put natural law into effect? Not man. Ultimately, the underlying intelligence in all of nature, or God, put natural law into effect. So we are talking about, when we talk about natural law, we're talking about God's laws. Laws that are put into effect. And again, this is why atheists will never be able to create freedom. It is an impossibility for an atheistic culture or a morally relativistic culture to create freedom. Can not be done according to the laws of nature. Impossibility. Because you are absolutely dismissing the source of where right and wrong and the consequences for choosing between right and wrong came from. You don't understand where freedom is derived from. You just don't understand. You refuse to accept it because you want not to be bound by those laws. Or in other words, you want to be God. Because only something that created those laws can ever possibly exempt oneself from those laws. And that's not really the case, because the creator and the laws of creation are one and the same. Even that's not above the law. It is the law. So how could you separate the creation and that which it has created? It is not possible to separate those things. They are one. This is the problem with the whole traditionally religious worldview, is that it always creates a separation between creator and created, when there is no separation. They are one and the same. Because the natural world is the physical domain and the physical domain is the spiritual domain. They are not separate things. The universe is the body of God. This is what people who want to just take it into a religious mindset instead of a spiritual understanding always degrade the understanding of nature and God too, by causing that separation in something that can never be separated. Okay? So the word natural means of, from, or related to God. Natural law are the laws of God. Okay? You don't want to use that term. Say they're the laws of the underlying creative force in all of nature that gave rise to all of nature. Okay? If you don't like the word God, if you're that babyish. Okay? And, whimpering over a word, crawl under the stairs and sit there in a fetal position over a word. Okay, so now let's get into the meat of what today's presentation is ultimately all about. What natural law is not. So I don't know how I could word it any more definitively. Okay, so for all the people out there that think natural law has to do with animals, okay, you have a retarded mindset. Your mind doesn't work according to regular speed. You have been slowed down by the social engineers, and you insist that something that has 100% nothing to do with what you are talking about is equivalent to it. That's called mental retardation. Okay? So let's snap out of it and let's really pay attention to what's really going on. Okay? What natural law is not. Natural law is definitively not, and has absolutely nothing to do with any of these things. Nothing to do with them. And we'll be taking these one at a time and going through them. Natural law has nothing to do with Darwin's theories regarding macrobiological evolution. Has nothing to do with the Darwinian notion of quote unquote survival of the fittest. It has absolutely nothing to do with what people call the so-called law of the jungle. It has absolutely nothing to do with what people call the so-called natural order of things, which isn't natural and it doesn't create order, what they think is the natural order. Okay? And here, let me just definitively state this. It has nothing to do with animals, period. Natural law has nothing to do with animals except don't cause harm to the animals. Okay? That's about the extent that natural law has to do with animals. Human beings shouldn't be harming animals because they're sentient beings. Okay? So it has zero to do with any aspect of behavior in the entire animal kingdom for any creature with less cognitive development and capabilities than a human being. So I don't know how much more clearly I could state that definition or caveat that natural law has absolutely zero to do with any aspect of animal behavior in the wild, on this planet, on any other planet. If the animal has a less developed brain, nervous system, cognitive capacity, understanding of, the ability to comprehend right from wrong, language systems, etc. Okay? Any moron can look at the difference between a human being and the rest of animals on this planet. If you can't, there's something very seriously broken in your brain. So let's not get into the whole semantics of this. This isn't a semantical game. Okay? With the state of the world, you don't have time to play fucking semantical games. Okay? It's very clear what's meant by this. Natural law doesn't have anything to do with animal behavior. It has everything to do with human behavior. Get your head out from up your ass, the people who still want to say natural law has anything whatsoever to do with animals, because it does not. Okay? I'm sick of hearing this shit from imbeciles who know nothing and have studied no aspect of it and talk out their ass. Because that's what they are. People who talk out their fucking ass. All right? I'm just going to come out and say it just like I would to you if I were talking to you on the street. Because this is how hard-headed fucks people are. All right? They just want to state something that absolutely isn't true just to hear the sound of the verbal splatteria coming out of their gullet. That's what they want to do. Natural law is definitively not and has absolutely nothing to do with any and every human-made law, including what people call common law. This goes for all the free men on the land, okay? Has nothing to do with common law, has nothing to do with free men on the land systems of law. Because they all give credence to and believe in the legitimacy of the laws of man. That's why they operate within their court system. And I'm telling you that all that system is people who want to be God, that have absolutely no bearing on reality whatsoever, have nothing whatsoever to do with natural law, and they have absolutely no legitimacy at all, and they don't rule anybody, including me. Okay? They want to think that because they think they're God. Nothing could be further from the truth. They're little boys and little girls who never grew up, whose mommy and daddy didn't pay enough attention to them when they're young. They have all these mommy and daddy abandonment issues, and so they grew up to be fucking psychopaths. They want to be God. That's who everybody in the whole court system and the whole legal system is. Imbeciles who think that human beings are God because they're social Darwinist trash. That's what they are. Social Darwinist trash. I'm fired up today, people. I'm fired up because I'm sick of the lack of understanding of the term natural law. You know, I was considering just calling it cosmic spiritual law because that's what it is. It's an accurate definition. But no, the phrase is natural law, lex naturalis. Okay? The word is natural law. The term is natural law. I'm not backing down. I'm taking the term. We're taking the term. You get it? It doesn't belong to you. Okay? There's a real meaning to it. That's why definitions exist. All right? You're not twisting it into something that it's not. The people who do understand it aren't going to allow it. That's how it's going to work. Okay? So we will hammer this understanding into people. Hammer it into people. It has nothing to do with any of these things. If you think it has to do with animal behavior other than human beings, you are a dunce who hasn't listened to one thing any philosopher or researcher since the dawn of time has ever said about how natural law works and operates in our world. It's called being a dunce who wants to create your own internalized definitions of things and then say that applies and it is operating in the real world when I just made it the fuck up. Okay? That's where most people are at with natural law, with an understanding of it. They have zero understanding of it. And they want to insist that their definition is the correct one. So let's take these one by one. Let's take them one at a time and go through them. People insist that natural law has anything to do with Darwin's theories regarding macrobiological evolution, the so-called Darwinian theory of evolution. And that is not what natural law is, has, or ever has been, or ever will be. Natural law has zero to do with Darwinian evolution. Oh, it has to do with real universal evolution in consciousness. It has a lot to do with that. But it has nothing to do with this clown's theories on how species allegedly transition from one species that is fully formed to another species that is fully formed, when his own theory of transitional species in the fossil record has never been borne out by actual real world evidence. People trot out certain examples, like Archaeopteryx, or this new, alleged amphibian that somehow eventually became some sort of a land dwelling creature, and there's no transitional fossil records. There's no transitional skeletons in the fossil record. This is just what's stated as evidence to support the Darwinian theory that one species becomes another. Now, I'm not saying there's no such thing as evolution in all of creation. I'm just saying I don't accept the theory that Darwin postulated, which he himself in his later years said would have to be distinctly evidenced by a lot of transitional species in the fossil record, not one or two. that they find and trot out and aren't even clear examples of transitional species. That's just what they are claiming are transitional species. Okay? But if you really look, there's no real transitional species found in nature. Okay? There are fully formed forms of species, and then they might look somewhat similar to other fully formed forms, but you never see something that is completely interspecies transitional. You don't find that in nature or in the fossil record. So now they want to postulate, it's very quick changes. It's not as fast as we, formerly thought, because they have to go back and forth into keeping people's minds occupied with belief in the theory, because this is all just part of the debate between religionists and scientists. That's where they want to keep you. They want to keep religionists on one side of the equation. They want to keep people who believe in scientism and Darwinism on another side of the equation, and atheism. Okay? Fighting amongst each other, none of them understanding natural law, therefore none of them able to really truly create a society based in real freedom. It's brilliant. Like I said, I can't really look at the social engineers and go, wow, I really hate you guys. I can't bring myself to really hate the dark occultists and the social engineers, folks. You want to call that whatever you want. You think that's some kind of a complex. You go right ahead and call it whatever the fuck you want. I really don't care. Okay? I'm done with what people think. I have been for a long time, but I'm super done with it, as most people can tell. Okay? I was around these people. I'm telling you, they're among the most intellectually advanced people in the world. They're way operating on a way higher level than people in the so-called freedom movement. You have no idea what their minds are like. You have no idea what they're capable of. You have no idea how advanced their willpower is. None. Unless you were involved in the dark occult, you don't know. You think you know, but you don't really know. Okay? You make the claim that you know. I'm telling you, from being around these people, I do know their mental state. I do know their willpower. And I'm telling you, it is so far in advance of what the average human being is like, it can't even be calculated. That's why they're winning. That's why they're going to continue to win. I don't care whether people like what I have to say, whether you agree with it, whether you accept it. I'm telling you, that's true. You don't know, you weren't in the position. And anybody who was in that position, they'll tell you the same damn thing. Because it's true. Okay? And unless we start understanding this stuff, don't expect the playing field to be leveled. It will never be leveled until we are operating on the same mental level of mental acuity that our enslavers are operating at. And I see no signs of that happening anytime soon. So going back to the slide, I see Darwinism as another religion. It's just something that is asked of people to believe in, just like religion is. Where there is no actual evidence for it, there is only postulation and speculation. Okay? Natural law has real-world evidence. It's called look at the state of human freedom first and foremost and exercise discernment, judgment, and common sense. And when you see societies behaving completely immorally and descending into totalitarianism, that's the causal factor connection. Morality and freedom are inextricably interwoven in the fabric of creation. There is tons of evidence to support that through all of human history. The problem is people are as dumb as 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag. Okay? And they haven't studied human history. You have millennials, like I talked about last week, claiming they want socialism, and they don't even understand the definition of socialism. That's how retarded they are. And then you have people that are so retarded that they think, I'm a socialist because I'm telling you that socialism is the root of all totalitarianism. I'm sorry, that think I'm a right-winger, I should say, not a socialist, because I'm attacking socialism and telling people that's the root of all totalitarianism, including National Socialism, that somehow I'm some radical right-winger, I mean, this shows you how religious in their political viewpoints people are and how limited an understanding of polarization dialectics they have. They don't understand mind control. They don't understand the strategies of mind control. They don't know what polarization dialectics are. Because they're in that mental schism of there having to be these two conflicting things. The only two conflicting things, folks, are whether something is in alignment with natural law or not. Meaning, is it based in freedom or is it based in slavery? Are people condoning slavery, or are they understanding that it's inherently illegitimate in nature? That's all. Nothing else. Though that's the only real dichotomy in all of nature. So, look, if you want to understand, this isn't going to be a long-form presentation about the proofs that Darwinism is wrong, okay? I'm going to recommend one particular researcher to do that, okay? The researcher I'm going to recommend is Lloyd Pye, okay? Lloyd Pye is the guy to check out as far as I'm concerned. Again, some people might like his research, some people might not, okay? But I guarantee you'll be enlightened. It will trigger some things that you have not considered if you really look into it. See, and this is the other point, folks, I'm going to get to in a moment. Most people don't do the research. They operate from a point of belief. They don't really do the work to look into it because it takes years. You can't do this research in a day or a week or a month. It takes years to do it because you have to read, and watch and listen and watch and listen. I'm going to give you some resources with this podcast, okay? Lloyd Pye has done tremendous work, written a lot of books, put out a lot of videos, a lot of lectures, okay? He wrote a book called Everything You Know Is Wrong, Book 1, Human Origins. And he followed that up with Everything You Know Is Still Wrong. He wrote a book on intervention theory regarding how human beings were interfered with as a species in the ancient past. And then he wrote another book called Where Did We Come From? The Mysterious Alien Origins of Humanity. Now, whether you ascribe to the ancient aliens hypothesis or not, Lloyd Pye's work is brilliant when it comes to looking at hominids, of which human beings are of the family Hominidae, okay? Or we are the class of primates known as hominids, okay? Or really, we're actually not. If you really want to get down to it, we're classified as that. Lloyd Pye is really saying we're something entirely different than that. We're a hybrid that came from hominids and another species, which I would feel is closer to the truth. Okay. So check out his website, Lloyd Pye, Lloyd with 2 L's, LLOYDPYE, LloydPye.com. You could check out his research material. Try, looking for his books online. If I find some of his full books, I'll link to them. But I'm definitely going to link to some of his videos, okay? So, again, this is somebody I highlighted and actually dedicated Cosmic Abandonment to, okay? Very scholarly individual. His research is incredible, all right? So, here's some Lloyd Pye videos for people to check out. You want to go on YouTube or any other video sharing site and you want to type in Lloyd Pye, Everything You Know Is Wrong. There's the actual YouTube URL, okay? You can pause this when you're looking at this video and open up a new browser and type that in if you want, or just type in Everything You Know Is Wrong into YouTube, Lloyd Pye. An Evening with Lloyd Pye. That's another great lecture to watch, okay, that gets into all of his research material regarding hominids and intervention theory. He has one called Hominoids, 20 million years of suppressed history. Okay, highly recommend it. His Nexus conference from 2003, his Nexus conference lecture from 2003 is also brilliant. And then he has a personal interview called Darwin Was Wrong. Okay. Now look, I'm only giving you one researcher right now because first of all, you research this guy, you can go on for like 10 years into his research. Okay. But I'm just pointing out one person. I'm not saying hinge everything about Darwinism not being correct on Lloyd Pye. No. You can launch into like 50 other researchers by looking into just one person's research, looking at his notes, looking at all the people that he talks about in his lectures, etc. Okay, and this is what I did in my Cosmic Abandonment series. If you go forward with the research that I presented in Cosmic Abandonment, and you look at all of the researchers that I talked about, that's like a lifetime of work. That's literally a lifetime of research. And again, I talked about this last week, all right? I talked about this dynamic last week because I get flack over it, okay? And I get flack from total know-nothings. That when you say, well, let's have a conversation about it. Are you familiar with this individual's work? Have you looked into the work of Brian Forrester? Okay? And they're like, I have no idea what you're talking about, man. Have you watched the entire Nephilim series by L.A. Marzulli? What the hell is that? Right? Have you read all the books of the Earth Chronicles by Sitchin? Never even heard of it. Right? So it's like you're talking with somebody who only wants to present an opinion, but has actually never looked into the work of researchers who have made this their entire life's work. But then you can go to source material. Okay? You can go to material that came out of the ancient world talking about interaction with these beings. Okay? The Upanishads, the Vedas, the Eddas. Okay? The Mahabharata. The Book of Enoch. The Bible itself. Particularly the Old Testament. All right? You could go on and on looking into source text. And most people don't do this. They don't want to spend the time to do the research. They just want to have an uninformed opinion and think that their opinion is as good as someone else's years and years of research. That's the epitome of hubris. So the cosmic abandonment presentation goes hand in hand with what I'm talking about. Okay, when it comes to understanding that natural law is not about Darwinism. Okay? Because Darwinism isn't about real human origins. This is. All right. So you can get that in my video section. You could order a hard copy on DVD or flash drive from donation gifts on my website. So look into it's not just about my findings, my presentation about my conclusions in cosmic abandonment. That's, I feel that's important, but that's not the ultimate aspect of why you should look into this. The ultimate aspect of why you should look into this is to look into the work of all the researchers I talk about in this presentation and also the podcast, the extended podcast series I did on it. Let's go back to what natural law is not and has absolutely nothing to do with. Let's look at the second aspect, the Darwinian notion of survival of the fittest. Okay? So when people hear the word natural, that's about survival of the fittest. That's about Darwinism, isn't it? And what they mean by that when they say survival of the fittest is they're talking about Darwin's book on the origin of species. Okay, now a lot of people don't know the full title of the book because many modern covers of this book in their modern printings, the modern editions that they're printed in, leave out the rest of the title, and they just call it Origin of Species. The book, the full title, if you read this entire title, is On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection. That's the first title. Now, many older books had secondary titles that they list, not just subtitles, but it could have been an additional title that you referred to the book as. It usually would say or, and then it would be followed by another title. This isn't really done in most modern books. It's an older practice that was done in, the 1800s, early 1900s, okay, and before. So if we look at the alternative title for the book, it is Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. Okay? Now, that didn't mean, I'm going to blow this up to show this to you. Okay? Let's zoom in. Okay? And it says, On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Survival. Now, here's the term that I'm talking about here, favored races. Now, Darwin himself did not mean favored human races. He's talking about species in the animal kingdom. However, people who wanted to take Darwinism, which had to do with survival of the most ruthless and ones who would do anything to other members of their species and other species in order to continue surviving and living, okay, and propagating their genes in the animal gene pool, okay? People in the elitist world, okay, in the psychopathic ruling class wanted to take Darwinism and adapt it to the human domain and say, because human beings are just nothing but animals and are no different than other animals, we can take the theory that Darwin came up with in The Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life, which was his alternative title to On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection. We can take his theories and we can apply them in the human domain. So we would end up with, instead of which animal has the biggest teeth and sharpest claws and the highest drive to kill, to survive, and it'll do whatever it has to kill and eat other animals. And therefore it rules the roost in the animal world. Okay. And others who don't have that viciousness or that surviving instinct will just go by the wayside and be eaten and or made extinct. We're going to take all of that idea of, quote, survival of the fittest, and we're going to apply it in the human realm so that it will be considered purely the natural order when a subclass of human beings who are actually occult magicians come out on top of everybody else because of what they know about the human psychology and because of their psychopathic mindset and desire to rule. And so they can actually apply that notion of the animal kingdom, the ruthlessness inherent in the animal kingdom, and therefore they could just apply that in the human domain, and it's perfectly fine and acceptable. And their genes got them there. They were the fittest in society. Their genes made it that way. Their genes got them to that position because they were, just genetically superior and came from, a more pedigreed bloodline in humanity, that got them to that position of power and got them into the ruling class. And we could just apply that to the whole structure of humankind, the whole hierarchical structure of humanity. Let's just apply it all the way down. And that's what gives us social Darwinism and eventually eugenics, as we're going to talk about. Okay. But this is the operating system model that the elite class are working with, that the social engineers are still subscribing to and working with. And unfortunately, it is still the model that the majority of slaves who are willing slaves and who are happy to be slaves, okay, are still operating under, believing that it's true, believing in social Darwinism, believing that, these people's genes got them there because they're just the best and the brightest and they're just number one, It has nothing to do with the accumulation of wealth that happened over the years that is just passed on to them without doing anything, No, nothing whatsoever to do with that, right? Most of them never having to work for anything they've ever gotten. They're some of the weakest people. They're not the See, the only thing that makes them, quote unquote, stronger than other people in this society is because they got handed things down from future generations that often pillaged and raped and conquered to get what they had. And they are just, using that wealth and influence just to preserve their position in an artificial construct because people believe in the social structure that they built. If that social structure that these social engineers built were to not be believed in anymore by human beings and collapse, forget it. These people would not be able to defend themselves they can't punch through a screen door. You know what I mean? They can't punch through a wet paper bag. These are the kind of people that if left to their own devices in nature would be dead within 24 hours. They'd be dead in the first 12 hours, in like a Hunger Games situation or something like that. They have zero survivability index, okay? Would not be able to do it because they're not naturally adapted to anything that's going on in the natural world. It's all artificial constructs that they've built their power upon, which require and depend on the belief of the average slave. That's why they're so successful, because people are so fucking gullible and will believe just about anything that they're told about what's real, instead of actually discovering what's real. That's why they'll believe in shit like money instead of understanding natural law. That's one of the main problems with the whole freedom community. Let me tell you, folks, the religion is their money is religion, and they couldn't give a goddamn about natural law. And they think that's going to be converted, that mindset. They believe erroneously in their own destroyed brain that mindset is going to be converted into freedom in the real world. They actually are that retarded that that's what they believe can happen. Enjoy being ruled by this class of people, dopes. That's all I have to say. Okay? Because that's what you are. That's unfortunately what you are. They're know-nothing dopes that in their hubris want to believe they have it figured out how it really works. You don't know anything, boy. You know nothing about how it works, little boy. Zero. Okay? But keep telling people that you do. People like that are a cancer in the freedom community. A cancer. And they're spreading their viral infection throughout the entire community. Okay? Because you don't understand the causal factors of what have led to the human condition of slavery. And therefore, if you don't understand those causal factors, you are in zero position of empowerment to do anything about the nature of the situation until you do correctly identify those causal factors. But these dunces don't want to do that. They just want to believe they're God because they trade positions with the sorcerer in this image in a heartbeat like that. Put the image up on the screen, full screen. See, the bulk of the freedom community and the bulk of the people who are slaves who say they want to be free, you'd trade positions with the sorcerer in a heartbeat. If all the money were flowing to you and all that influence and power were flowing to you because of an artificial constructural idea that doesn't exist in real nature, in the world of the real. Okay? See, but that's the God that's worshipped that the people in the so-called freedom or anarchist community worship at the altar of. Okay? Now, I'm not telling you, be some kind of ascetic pauper and, try to not even eke out a living in what is unfortunately the world. Okay? We need resources to do what we are doing because other people still believe in money. Okay, so you're going to have to operate within that system till we collectively recognize it for the illusion that it is and take it down and disassemble the structure. Back to what natural law is not. Let's go to the next point. We'll take them in order. The next point, the so-called law of the jungle. Okay, so many people think this is what natural law is. Okay, and this is another dialectic. We're going to keep hammering on the idea of dialectics over and over and over and over again, folks. It cannot be understated because there's this dualistic thinking. And anybody thinks that everybody thinks nothing could exist outside of these dialectics. So you hear these two things bannered about. Man's law, the rule of law. They're not talking about the rule of natural law. The rule of law is the rule of man's law. Right? Man as God being the lawmaker, creating legislation through government. That's what they say is the rule of law. No, that's called slavery. That's called moral relativism because there's no such thing as two places where the laws are the same or two times when the laws are the same. They're constantly being renewed and refreshed in every position and place and time, which is the definition of moral relativism. Okay? And then they want to give you the notion that the opposite of that is how animals behave toward each other in the wild. Okay? So they want to give you those two dichotomies. They want to give you those two dialectics, polarization dialectics, mind control dialectics. And then they want you to think that's all there is. There's no other kind of law. So you either believe in man's law as the rule of law, as the ruling law for all human beings, or you believe in we should live by the law of the jungle. And neither of these things are true or acceptable. Natural law is not the law of the jungle. Hammer it through your brain. It has nothing to do with animals or how animals treat each other. Never has, never did, never will. Doesn't mean it now and never will. Okay? So this is the title image, the overarching image that we used for the whole, title card for today's show. A lion in the fields of Africa taking down a water buffalo. Okay? By the throat. It'll kill it, it'll tear into it, it'll eat the internal organs and whatever else it's going to use as its food, fuel, and supply. And some other lions will probably join it in that. And then other, creatures who are those who come after a predator feast and then feast on the remains, the carrion, etc. This is all animal behavior. This has absolutely nothing to do with natural law, nothing to do with human beings. Because human beings are not these types of animals. They are of a whole different family of animalia. Okay? Which I'm going to talk about. There is a specific place when natural law begins to apply in the classification system of life. Okay? And we're going to get to that in a little bit. But this has nothing to do with natural law, folks. And you need to get out of your notion, the idea that natural law has anything to do with the way animals behave in the wild. Now, I'm going to play a video clip of a demon. Okay, you're going to actually see a demon in real life, okay, who very happily left this world last year, along with his demonic cohort, okay? And I'm going to play George Bush Sr.'s playing out the polarization dialectic on the public, okay? That's what this guy is doing. He's a mind control social engineer, okay? He's one of the mind controllers, one of the dark occultists, one of the social engineers, and he's totally playing the public like a fiddle in this video, where he talks about the New World Order and the rule of law. So let's hear what this demon has to say.
We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order, a world where the rule of law, not the law of the jungle, governs the conduct of nations. When we are successful, and we will be, we have a real chance at this new world order, an order in which a credible United Nations can use its peacekeeping role to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders.
Okay, so folks, he said so many things in this clip that have to be analyzed, okay? He said, we have an opportunity for a new world order, okay? This is obviously the dark new world order. This is the new world order where the globalists have really taken the entire planet through some form of international socialism and have turned it into the, quote, global village, by which they can centrally dictate all of man's laws, and they would apply everywhere in the world. Okay, so this is a global totalitarian society, the dark New World Order. Okay, it is not the New World Order that I often speak of a society that has learned natural law and brought their behavior into alignment with it, and therefore can create a new world order based in freedom. That's the light New World Order, or the positive outcome of the world in transition. Okay, in between a state where there is some freedom left in the world and some truth and light left in the world, versus a state where a world where all of society has ultimately been closed down and turned into a totalitarian regime. We're not in either one of those places yet. That's why the world is in transition between one of the New World Orders or the other. I call the world where we really propagate natural law and freedom the light New World Order. Okay? And I call the world that this demon in this video clip is talking to the dark New World Order. Okay? So to go back to what he was talking about, he says a world in which the rule of law governs the conduct of nations, not the law of the jungle. So you notice he's pulling the dialectic here. He's saying we only have a choice between man's law, the rule of man's law of government, and descending into the chaos and ruthlessness of the law of the jungle, of how animals live amongst each other in their struggle for survival in the wilderness. So think about what it's doing psychologically in the mind. It's saying, well, would you rather live as beasts of the field, as animals do in nature? No, of course you wouldn't. That would be what you would consider chaos and disorder and discomfort. So the only other alternative is to give us the control to bring about this global village, this new world order in which our law rules over everything. Okay? Very significant dichotomy, very significant polarization dialectic. So the next part of it is he says to fulfill the promise and vision of the UN's founders. A president of the United States talking about that his job, he's standing in Congress when he's saying this, saying that his job is to fulfill the vision of the founders of the United Nations. Not saying he wants to fulfill the vision of the founders of the United States, the founding fathers of the United States. No, he's saying that he thinks our goal should be to fulfill the promise of the UN's founders. Well, what's their promise? Their promise is the global village of the New World Order of international globalism, communism, international socialism. Okay? That's the vision of the UN's founders. Okay? So I'm going to jump back to the slides and move forward. All right? And let's go to the next point. So again, natural law has absolutely nothing to do with the law of the jungle. Now, another phrase you hear in direct conjunction with survival of the fittest, law of the jungle, is the quote-unquote natural order. Okay? And we've already touched on this, that this is where social Darwinism came out of, from the Darwinian theory of evolution, because certain people who were high-level elites and or social engineers, okay, and or family bloodline members of the ruling class, wanted to take Darwin's theories and extrapolate them and interpolate them and extrude them into the human domain. All right, so let's look at how this worked. So social Darwinism came up shortly after Darwin's original theories on macrobiological evolution came forward in his book On the Origin of Species. And again, this is where they're talking about favored races that he talks about in the title, the alternative title of the book. And they don't apply that to the animal realm as species, but that now they're applying it actually to the human realm. Social Darwinism is simply the application of the theories of Charles Darwin to society. Evolution had become a largely accepted belief in the Second Industrial Revolution. This was a continuation of those ideas outside of the scientific realm. William Graham Sumner and Herbert Spencer both promoted social Darwinism by stating that men were either to struggle, to compete, to succeed, or to fail. Those who succeeded were fit to remain in society, and those who did not would eventually be eliminated. So this is the actual root. Some of these individuals, these ideologues here, are the original champions of the idea of social Darwinism. And that led to eugenics, which led to the Eugenics Society in America, led to influencing the eugenics operations of the Third Reich. Okay. And, we have the horrors of World War II from that point. So one of the other individuals who was a social engineer that people have to understand brought forward, who is considered the father of modern social Darwinism, was Francis Galton. Galton was Charles Darwin's half-cousin. He discovered and or invented many advances in science, including in statistics and in fingerprints, but he tried to apply Darwin's theories to human beings. Again, that's what social Darwinism is. This is what people talk about as the, quote, natural order, not only when it comes to human beings, but many people actually idiotically want to apply how animals behave toward each other and carry that and bring it into the human domain. Whenever I hear this by people, especially people who say that they're advocating for freedom, I just absolutely cringe. I have to absolutely just cringe in horror at the pure imbecilic thought process, okay? Which I don't understand how people who say they want freedom can actually believe that human beings are just any other animal, which proves to me they don't even understand basic classification of life. Okay? They're not even adept enough to learn basic biology, let alone understand we shouldn't behave like the rest of the animal kingdom. And here's why. They're atheists, they're scientism worshipers, and they're social Darwinists. That's all people like that come down to. And you put all those three together, you show me a person who's an atheist, a person who believes in social Darwinism, and who is a moral relativist, okay? And I will show you right back in the mirror a psychopath, because that's what they have to be to believe in all of that, okay? That's what these people are. They're deep down inside, whether they want to acknowledge it or admit it or not, they are diseased. They're psychopathically diseased. They're soul sick. That's what it really comes down to, folks. Social Darwinism, the belief in eugenics, the belief in moral relativism is soul sickness. All right? And that's what most of the people in the freedom community have. More than don't. If I had to gauge it, I'd say it's about the same as the rest of society. It's 2/3 to 1/3. 2/3 of the people are 100% soul sick, left-brained jackasses who are scientism worshipers, who believe in the theories of Darwin and apply it to the human realm, believe humans are no different than animals, and accept social Darwinism and ultimately moral relativism. And I don't care what name you want to call that. I call it what it really is. Satanism. That's what Satanism is, as we're going to get to in these slides. Planning on taking your calls in the third hour? Folks, it's like every other show. It's going to take as long as it takes. Last week, I went right up to the end and didn't really get to take calls. I'm going to endeavor to take your calls, but the presentation comes first, and it'll take as long as it takes. Okay? So, Galton was an elitist. He believed in breeding an elite class, which is not agreeable to democracy. The person who made this slide used that term. It's not agreeable to freedom. Okay? It's the belief that some people should be rulers and other people should be slaves. That's all that belief really comes down to. It's the belief in a master class and a slave class. He was a eugenicist, meaning he believed in the hierarchy of the human races and social classes, meaning that those who are in a higher position of power can ultimately dictate what happens to the people in the lower positions of the hierarchy, of the hierarchical system of control and power. Therefore, if the people in the higher level positions of the hierarchical system of control and power felt that there were characteristics in the lower class that they wanted bred out, well, they could breed them right out of them and or kill them, because they have characteristics that are simply undesirable to the people in the higher class, in the hierarchy. That's what eugenics is. And this is a part. Social Darwinism and eugenics are tenets 3 and 4 of Satanism. Tenet 1 is self-preservation above all else, which is the notion of survival of the fittest in the animal kingdom applied to the human kingdom. That we must do anything we have to physically survive, even at the expense of our moral fiber. Okay? Even at the expense of harming other people. The ends justify the means. That's the first tenet of Satanism. When it comes to the improvement of the self, when it comes to the enhancement or comfort of the self, or coming into a higher level position of power or influence, or just having resources, okay? The self comes first and everybody is second fiddle. That's the pecking order, okay? And that's the first tenet of Satanism. The second tenet is moral relativism, that there's no objective standard of right and wrong. We can make it up as we see fit because we're God. No other law binds us, so therefore we can make up what right and wrong are. And then you can easily see when you do that, and then you take the flawed theory of macrobiological evolution and then you extrude it into the human domain, you end up with social Darwinism, which is the third tenet of Satanism. And finally, which is there has to be a social strata pecking order in the human domain like there is in the animal kingdom. And the most ruthless humans will naturally rise to the top of the human roost. Okay? Then you come to the final solution. You extrapolate this all the way out to its final ending, which is eugenics, which means some people are gods who can determine who gets to live and who must die. That's it. Okay? That's the final aspect of the plan for Satanists becoming God on earth. And that's what this, elitist class that included Darwin and Galton and the other social engineers who came up with social Darwinism were all about. Actually, really not so much Darwin as those who came after him, who weren't his contemporaries, but who came after him and adapted his theory to the human domain. Because that's what it's ultimately all about, folks, is eugenics. That's what these social engineers are. And they're not only operating in the realm of the physical to promote and conduct eugenics, they are operating in the epigenetic domain, which is the domain of consciousness, the domain of the mind. They are changing human thoughts so that the expressions that get manifested in the world based upon human thought get changed. That's how you're conducting eugenics through epigenetics, or as I like to refer to it, epi-eugenics. See, epi-eugenics is getting the herd to cull itself and cull characteristics out of the human herd based on mind control techniques that you apply. See, you're getting your mind-controlled cattle to actually do things to their own gene pool without you having to do it directly through physical means by killing people or forcibly sterilizing them. You're getting them to do it by how they think, the erroneous ways that they think. That's what eugenics is. And folks, everything that I've been talking about here, all of these aspects of social Darwinism that come from that are all aspects of the misunderstanding of natural law. Okay? Where people think it's all about the quote natural order of Darwinism, that the natural order is dog eat dog. And, we should be behaving like the lion taking down the water buffalo on the plains of Africa and being the most ruthless in the human domain. Okay? If you switch back to the slide, I just want to show you what this ultimately all is. It's all Satanism. It has nothing to do with anything regarding natural law, folks. It is the antithesis of that. These beliefs, these ideologies are purely satanic and come out of the satanic religion. And if you don't believe me, just look at the source material involved in Satanism, or particularly go and look at some of the publications put out by, the Cloven Hoof. Look at some of the things that are written in that publication that was put out by the Church of Satan, which was their bi-monthly newsletter, supposed to be monthly or quarterly. I'm not really sure. But, maybe I'll publish some of those and you could read inside of those how absolutely in your face, out in the open, the idea of eugenics is. National Socialism is huge in that whole field, in the whole satanic field. And social Darwinism, huge. This idea of a natural order and we're the gods of the society. And, and ultimately it just comes down to eugenics. Of them wanting to be God and, kill who has characteristics that they think are unfavorable. I don't care by what definition anybody talks about that as, okay? I'm going to tell you what it really is, and all of that mindset is Satanism. And guess what, folks? They give you mini-me Satanism. Mini-me Satanism is here, one of the tenets of the satanic religion, folks. Just look it up if you don't believe me. Just read it in the Satanic Bible, in the Satanic Rules of the Earth, etc. Okay? Man is looked at as the Satanic Statements, I believe this one is in. Okay? Just another animal. That's one of their main tenets. And that's what social Darwinism is. You're applying Darwin's theories of the animal kingdom and bridging them into the human social strata. Okay? So they look at human beings as just any animal, just any other animal. No, we are not just any other animal. That's incorrect. Human beings are not just any other animal, nor are we supposed to behave like animals. Our moral standards should be higher than any standards that are applied to the animal kingdom. You don't apply morality to the animal kingdom for the very reason that you understand they don't have a actively developed brain or entire cognitive development and capabilities that human beings have. It's common sense apparent. It should be readily common sense apparent to anyone looking at it, even cursorily. So let's go back and look at this dynamic, okay? That natural law is definitely not and has absolutely nothing to do with any aspect of behavior in the entire animal kingdom for any creature with less cognitive development and capabilities than a human being. This means natural law does not apply to any animal in the human kingdom that we have classified as animals, except for human beings. It only applies to human beings. It does not apply to any animal with any less cognitive development and mental capabilities and psychological capabilities than a human being, period. So here's one of the things I hear tragic morons saying in the so-called freedom, so-called spiritual communities regarding natural law. When, again, they should just videotape themselves. I say this to people constantly. Look, I do it every week. So I'm not giving you any advice that I don't do myself, folks. And I go back and I do listen. And I understand that nobody is doing the job that I'm doing with the explanations of what's going on this planet better than me. Sadly. I'm horrified and upset by that. Okay? But let me tell you something. There is no show like this anywhere on the airwaves in the entire world. I go back and I listen to the job that I do. And again, not to have any hubris about it or toot my own horn, but I'm telling you, I don't hear anybody else speaking as plainly and clearly and talking about these dynamics directly out in the open and explaining actually how it really is just about anywhere else on the internet airwaves. And that's a tragedy in and of itself. Because like I said, in my earlier years, naively, I was expecting that if you told me approaching the year 2020, how many people would understand this and be teaching, I would have told you at least 10 million people throughout the world. That's the number I would have given you of hardcore advanced natural law teachers that were propagating this notion to all the people of the earth. I would have told you there would have been by now 10 million people teaching natural law like Mark Passio has taught it by this point in time in history. And boy, oh boy, did I, in my youth, underestimate the pure sheer stupidity of humanity. And the dark occultists who tried to tell me how thick and hard-headed humanity was and how spiritually dead they were, I wish I would have listened in my youth. You know what I might have done? I might have stayed right put where I was, never set foot outside that door, and never said a fucking word. Okay? And I would have probably saved myself a lot of fucking aggravation. Because I know that they're correct. Humanity is unteachable. I no longer even do this, folks, because I believe we can really, truly turn it around. I don't really believe that. Humanity's way too fucking hard-headed for that. Way too fucking hard-headed. The ego is too strong. People think they're God way, way too strongly. We're not pulling this around, folks. I do this now as testimony. That's all. That's why I do what I do. I do what I do only to put the truth out into the universe as a witness. This is witnessing. This is witness testimony. And we know who's on trial. Okay? That's all this is. All right? So back to the slide. I hear tragic imbeciles, tragic morons in the so-called truth and freedom communities saying yeah, you know what natural law is? I might have to go to the vomit puppet. I may have to. Let's see. Okay, but I may have to. Okay. They say, yeah, you know what natural law is? Let's see if I can get the voice right. Yeah, guys, you know what natural law is? I'm going to tell you all about what natural law is now. All you got to do, you got to go out in the wilderness. You got to grab your camera. You got to sit there for hours and you got to observe animals in nature, or you got to just observe natural processes. That's natural law. That'll teach you all you need to know about natural law. Yeah. I mean, you smacked ass. Well, how can I insult you more? Please, somebody tell me how I can insult the intelligence of these people anymore. Because again, you need to record yourself, then play it back and hear how fucktarded you sound. Okay, that's what you need to do. Back to the slide. This is not natural law. This has nothing to do with natural law at all. Nothing to do with it. You are not going to learn natural law by sitting in the wilderness and observing what happens. You're not going to learn natural law by observing animal behavior. Will not happen, will not occur. Two different things, two totally separate things. One having nothing to do with the other. I don't understand where this even comes from. And I hear it over and over and over again by imbecile after imbecile after imbecile. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable how social engineers can get people to believe this bullshit and have no understanding of what natural law really is. None. And then claim that they do and are telling people that this is how you learn it. It's sickening. It's sickening. Folks, I'm going to actually give you the dividing line of where natural law understanding starts to apply. Okay? Where in the development of life that natural law begins to apply to living beings. Okay? So this is the classification system that scientists on our planet, at least, have come up with to categorize the many different varieties of life, of living things. Okay? So you have domains, right? So you have prokaryote domain, eukaryote domain. There is a third. I can't recall it off the top of my head. But eukaryote, I believe it's like there's nuclei to the cells. Okay? Then you go into the kingdom of either plants or animals. Okay, or single-celled organisms, okay? So we're eukaryotes, that's our domain, human beings. We are in the kingdom of animalia, which means animal life. Now, it's very interesting to note that animalia comes from the word animus, or animus in Latin, meaning spirit, okay? So we're talking about those that are imbued with a soul now. The plant kingdom is a hive mind kingdom, okay? It's not an individuated animal, okay? So that's why plants aren't in the kingdom of animalia, meaning having a soul. All animals are, okay? They move independently because they are imbued with spirit. This is why it is different eating a plant than it is eating an animal. And people don't understand this classification distinction. Not only should they look at it from a scientific point of view, they should also, of course, look at it from an occult point of view. And you're not going to understand it from an occult point of view unless you really study Kabbalah, Freemasonry, and especially Rosicrucianism. That's the field of the occult that you have to look into when it comes to understanding the soul dynamics involved in life. Okay? So then you have a phylum, which is a further classification down below kingdom. And we're chordata, meaning that we have a spinal column. Okay? We're vertebrates. Okay? Then there's a class, mammalia, mammals. We're warm-blooded organisms as opposed to cold-blooded, like reptiles are. Then there's an order within mammals that are primates. So we are like other primate beings because we're that type of mammal. Okay, so we're like our cousins, ancestors in the primate kingdom. And then finally you have family. Okay, now this is where natural law begins to apply. When you hit this aspect all the way down in the classification system of life, it begins to apply in the family known as Hominidae. Hominidae. Okay, meaning the hominids. This is where brain structures begin to become complex enough for the cognitive functions that are required for morality, for an understanding of whether something is a moral behavior or not. Then the universe says, okay, the biology is in place. Now we have to start applying the laws that apply to the beings with the capacity for holistic intelligence, or in other words, the understanding of the difference between right behavior and wrong behavior. And this is where it starts, in family Hominidae. Okay? And then you go below that, you have a genus and a species. Homo is the species of humanity, and then the genus of humanity, and then the species is sapiens sapiens, meaning wisest of the wise. It's pretty hubris, okay, to even call us that. But there you have it. That's why we're Homo sapiens sapiens. And folks, it is a total truth that the only living species on Earth belonging to the family Hominidae is Homo sapiens sapiens, or modern human beings. You know, there are some scientists who want to classify other types of primates in with hominidae, I should say. But in general, it is classically considered that the only species in the family of hominidae is Homo sapiens sapiens, or in other words, modern human beings. So this is why natural law applies to the family of hominidae and does not apply to lower order animals. If you want to look at it as higher, lower, okay? I would just look at it as more complexly developed versus less complexly developed, okay? And this is one of the things that makes us more complexly developed than any other animal in the animal kingdom, the human brain. So we have a threefold aspect to the brain. This is called the triune brain model, put forward by Paul MacLean, the neuroscientist. Okay? Human neurochemistry and brain development is definitely more complicated than a simple threefold model, but it generally explains in very easy to understand terms and simple structures where the functionality of the components that comprise the brain lie. So we have a reptile brain, the brainstem and the cerebellum, which is largely responsible for respiration and motor skills and survival mechanisms, fight or flight responses. Okay? And then you have a central component to the brain comprised of a lot of different complexes that are responsible for the generation of neuropeptides, which regulate our emotions and make our emotions possible. And that's called the limbic brain. Okay, you have things like the thalamus, the hypothalamus, the pituitary and pineal glands, etc., and other constructs within the midbrain, as it is called. Okay, so that's the mammalian brain. So, reptiles have a similar brain to the brain stem, and mammals have a similar brain to the limbic brain, but only human beings have as developed of a neocortex, which is the new brain, or the human brain, as human beings, okay? And our neocortex is responsible for higher order thought functions. Okay, we talked about this in podcast number 1. Okay, I went over the structure of the brain and how the brain functions. All right, so all the things that make us human wouldn't be possible without the neocortical part of the brain. And it's bilaterally symmetrical. And there are certain functions that are more governed by the left hemisphere of the brain and other functions that are more governed by the right hemisphere of the brain. Again, this is not a cut and dried, absolute left and right model. It's a generalized model that The left hemisphere largely makes possible and is responsible for these modalities of thinking. Of course, you're using your whole brain in any given task or, aspect of thinking. Okay. But largely when you're using the left brain, you're engaging things. When you're using it more, you're engaging in dynamics of thought that are more analytical, logical, precise, repetitive, organized, detail-oriented, scientific, detached, literal, and sequential. Okay? So it is the series processor of the mind. Okay? It takes things in sequential, linear order. It breaks things down to their constituent elements. It thinks rationally, linearly, very organized, detail-oriented. And it's also, like the reptilian part of the brain, repetitive. Okay, and can be very detached from the rest of things, okay, and other people. This is where the problem in the truth movement lies. You have very left-brain people who are selfish and aren't spiritually developed because they have an imbalance toward the left brain, and you have a lot of selfishness. You have a lot of me thinking. But then the right brain hemisphere makes other dynamics possible in human thought. You have creative intelligence. This is intuition, imagination, general heuristic thinking, intuitive, conceptual, big picture heuristic thinking, empathic. Our empathy, sympathy for others comes from there. This is compassion, okay? Figurative and irregular forms of thought. All right, so this is the parallel processor. There's no linear time with this aspect of the mind. Okay, it takes things in parallel. It sees the whole big picture. All right, both of these things are critically important. It isn't to say the right brain or left brain is better. We need to exercise all of these thought functions and bring them into balance. That's how we bring our psychology into balance. That's how we ultimately bring our soul into balance. And the people who are soul sick have gone off in one modality or other. All the way into the left brain or all the way into the right brain. Right brain people can't focus. They can't get anything done. They imagine a whole bunch of stuff but can't perform it pragmatically in the world to actually accomplish real world tasks. Left brain people become, overly analytical assholes who only care about themselves, So you fall off into imbalance in both directions. The idea is to bring it into balance and harmony and use it all. When we use that, we become something that is greater than the sum of our parts when we operate on that kind of balance. So the last dynamic in this list is any and every human-made law, including common law. Natural law has absolutely nothing to do with man-made law. If you are reading in any book, pamphlet, essay, anything written, or any lecture that tells you that natural law is a system of man's law, it's either completely wrong, the person is ill-educated, uninformed, or is absolutely lying to you to try to deceive you about what natural law actually is. Natural law are the laws of God. They have nothing whatsoever to do with the laws of man. Okay? So let's look at this dynamic. Here's someone who wants to be God, who thinks that they're God. They're in the Saturnian, cult, the black-robed cult, the disciplinarian cult of Saturn, okay? Wielding the hammer of God, right? Wielding the symbolic hammer of Thor, or nature. They are commanding nature, the axe, the hammer, the flag, okay? This is the idea of the stylized flagpole that then became an axe or hammer in other cultures. In the Norse culture, it became the hammer of Thor, and again in hero cults that eventually paved the way for Freemasonry, it became the sacred axe, often depicted as having a single blade, but then often depicted having a double blade, looking very much like, if you turned it upside down, Thor's hammer. Okay? And that's what this is depicting here. This is someone saying, I wield nature. Okay? Because I'm God. I wield the law. This is Satanism. Ladies and gentlemen, make no mistake. That's a Satanist. All of them. Not some of them. All of them. By the very nature that they believe they're the law, that they even represent the law. That's a Satanist. Go back to this image full screen. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a Satanist. That's what a Satanist looks like. And they give you their mini-me version of Satanism to believe in so that they can control you and judge you and wield power over you. And because you believe it, you've fallen into their cult power and influence. And let me tell you something. It's a cult without a name. It's a cult without ethnic boundaries. It's a cult without financial boundaries. It's a cult without cultural boundaries. It's a cult without ostensible religious boundaries. It's a cult with no boundaries according to age, with no boundaries according to sex. None. They don't make those distinguishments. They don't make those, gradations. As long as you're working toward the aims of the cult, that's all that matters. And this is what people have to understand about worldwide Satanism. They're not all rich white men. It's not all Jewish people. It's not all Freemasons. It's not all Jesuits. These are all lack of understanding of how the dynamic of the occult really works in the real world. Okay? That's like saying all mafias are Italian mafias. No, incorrect. There's Jewish mafias, there's Russian mafias, there's Latino mafias, there's French mafias, there's Chinese mafias, there's mafias in every culture. Has absolutely nothing to do with one group of people, folks. The occult are people that understand the human psyche and the laws of nature, are holding back that understanding from other people by discouraging people from looking into those laws. And therefore they wield an extreme power differential over the ignorant. Okay? You have the psychopathi ruling over the ignorati. All right? That's what it really is. Has nothing to do with the Illuminati. It has to do with the psychopathi and the ignorati. Okay? And the psychopathi rule the ignorati because the ignorati remain ignorant. The Illuminati are people like me who are trying to explain the truth to people that don't want to fucking hear it. Who need to just give up this endeavor and say it was never possible from the beginning because you were never working with prima materia. You were never working with prime matter, with first matter that is capable of being converted into a body of light mentally. You can't shine shit, in other words. And when you slap it, it smears. When you slap it, it splatters. And when you try to shine it, it smears. Okay? That's what humanity is. I wish I didn't have to say it that way, folks. But my life experience has taught me otherwise. My life experience has taught me that what these people are saying is absolutely true. And it doesn't mean I agree with their methods or want them to succeed. At some point, it's like I don't take anybody's side but the truth. That's it. I'm not on their side, and I'm most certainly not on your side. I'm on the side of truth itself, and that's what I serve. Let's look at, finally, before we take some calls, a couple of slides from my natural law seminar. This was the breakdown between natural law and man's law, and the difference between them. Natural law is based upon eternal principles and truth that are inherent to creation. Man's law, on the other hand, is based on dogmatic beliefs, which are constructural ideas that exist nowhere but in the human mind. Natural law can only ever be harmonized with. It can be discovered and harmonized with due to knowledge and understanding. Whereas man's law can only be complied with due to fear of punishment. That's the only reason people follow man's law. The reason people follow natural law is because they develop an understanding by way of knowledge regarding what the consequences of human behavior will be in the natural domain. And if they say that they want a better result, then they adjust the behavior to bring it into accordance with higher level spiritual law. Natural law, is universal. It exists and applies anywhere in the universe regardless of location, whereas man's law differs with location based upon the whim of legislators, which is one of the definitions of moral relativism. Natural law is eternal and immutable. It exists and applies for as long as the universe exists and cannot ever be changed. Man's law, on the other hand, changes with time based upon the whim of legislators, a definition of moral relativism. When we understand the differences, the true inherent differences between man's law and natural law, we have to ask the question. We come down to an understanding. Well, so what does this mean for man's law? Well, here's what it actually means for man's law. We apply simple if-then logic, if we have the ability to reason and cognize at a simple if-then logical level. If a particular man-made law is in harmony with natural law, then it follows logically that it is redundant. That's like stating that the sky refracts a blue color on the earth during a cloudless sunny day. That's a redundancy. You cannot, writing that down and saying it is a law that the sky refracts a blue color during a sunny cloudless day from the earth is a redundancy. It just does that. That's how it just works. You writing it means nothing. Okay, you can come to an understanding of that and write it down so that other people can come to an understanding of it, but that doesn't mean that that's what makes it true. Just like me saying this isn't what makes it true. It's true regardless of whether I ever spoke it or not. So if it's in harmony with natural law, it follows logically that a man-made law is redundant since it is stating a truth that is inherent, pre-existing, and self-evident. Therefore, that law is both irrelevant and unnecessary. You are stating what is already true. Now let's do another if-then statement. If a particular man-made law is in opposition to natural law, then it follows logically that it is both false, meaning it is incorrect, and it is immoral, meaning it is causing harm. It is harmful to other sentient beings. Or in other words, it is wrong, the word that we use for both false and immoral. Whereas we use the word right for both true and moral. Therefore, that law cannot be legitimately binding upon anyone. It cannot be legitimately binding. Only the natural law can be legitimately binding. So what does this mean for man's law? It means you throw it out. It has no place in the natural world. It doesn't bind you or me. It has absolutely no bearing on human behavior except when people believe that it's legitimate and then live their lives violently in opposition to natural law because of their cult belief in man's law. That's all that's happening. Folks, we have to understand natural law is a force that exists in the universe, in nature itself. It has absolutely no basis in man or humanity. It only applies to humanity. But it is not man-made. It is not a man-made force. Natural law exists everywhere in creation. There is no place you can go in the universe to escape it. Man, if humanity, humankind in general, if we are being honest with ourselves, the only thing that we can really genuinely do is to discover how natural law operates in our world. And then we could try to convey that understanding to others to help them not to have to go through the immensity of suffering that is culminating at the period in human history in which we are living and which our descendants are going to unfortunately have to live. You know, this is what the occult is to me. When I was looking for an image to represent the world of the occult, the world of the understanding of the hidden laws of nature, this is the image that I pulled from the internet. Because it represents striving to understand natural law. It represents what delving into the matter that comprises the occult world more than any other image that I've ever found. And look, folks, when we understand natural law, it's the key to everything. Okay? It is the key, as I've said many times, that will unlock all the doors, all the locks on all the doors to all the cages, all the prisons. You know, with that key, we can do anything. Without it, we're wandering lost in a desert, blind. So if you can hear the wisdom in the words that I have spoken here today, try to understand deeply what natural law is. Watch my whole seminar on it and other podcasts that I've done on it. Read the resources that I'm going to post with this podcast. Watch some of the videos I'm going to post with this podcast and understand what natural law most certainly is not. And understand it well enough that you can convey that to others, because that's what the great work is ultimately all about. Once you have that key in hand, okay, just to go back to this final slide one moment, okay, once you have that master key in hand, right, it's not there for you to just hold and wield selfishly. It is there for you to hand off to other people. Just look at it making copies of. You're making digital copies of it, and you're giving out those decryption keys for how the universe works to the rest of your fellow brothers and sisters in humanity. Okay, that's what the great work is to do. All right, so with that, that concludes my formal slide presentation for this episode of What on Earth is Happening, entitled What Natural Law is Not. I hope you enjoyed it. I want to go back briefly to the slides to let people know that if you have found value in the work that I've done on this podcast and on all of my work here at What on Earth is Happening, please go to whatonearthishappening.com and click on the gifts tab. Okay, that'll take you to the donation gifts area of What on Earth is Happening, which has hard copies of all of my work on DVD and flash drive. You could also get other nice promotional items like t-shirts and coasters and keychains and buttons and stickers, etc. So it's something that I do to give back hard physical resources to the community, to people that want to give them out to families and friends. They make great gifts, and not only that, but they're educational. They help teach people these lessons. Okay, so if you found value in What on Earth is Happening, please visit gifts on my website, whatonearthishappening.com. Also, go to the ARC tab and request the ARC drive. Okay, you could fill out a form there to request it. You could watch a video on how the ARC drive works, what it's all about. whatonearthishappening.com/ARC, or just click the ARC tab. Okay, many people have taken me up on this tremendous repository of knowledge, which is the foundation of the research that I have done and amassed from the internet, as an aggregator of esoteric information. So that's an offer that I make and is still going strong today at What on Earth is Happening. Also, if you just want to make a straight donation, if you find value in this work, go to the donate tab. That's whatonearthishappening.com/donate. 10 different methods for donation on the donation page, including PayPal, Patreon, I believe 5 different cryptocurrency methods, okay? Of traditional personal check, traditional money order, and also our Amazon wish list. If you click on the donate supplies button, okay, that'll take you to my Amazon tech needs list. I'm very, very humbled to say that people have donated every item that I've ever put on that tech needs list. Seriously, folks, like that, I couldn't have even imagined that when I first made that needs list. Okay. We always require technical stuff here at different times, to do what we do on What on Earth is Happening. And I'm telling you, it almost chokes me up that I've put items there that I require for the daily operation of this whole production, and everyone has been sent to me as a donation. Like, that's tremendous. So thank you to everyone who has done that. It really means a lot. Okay. So